For me, there was always a sense of angels around or other beings around that I could talk to. Yeah, this intuitive, other dimensional influence and conversations in my life. I was really late high school, maybe even early 20s, where I really understood that not everybody had regular access to information that wasn't just received with our five senses in the physical realm.
But until that time, you had had a lot of experience with it on your own, basically, right?
I had, and I would maybe share a little bit about it, and it was like, oh, you must have dreamt that, and so I just assumed that other people who, in particular for me, like I wanted questions or things weren't so working out the way I wanted them to.
Yeah.
And having conversations about needing some assistance. I really could use some help with this issue of being a kid, and they would, I just had these inspirational ideas that didn't feel necessarily like they were just in my own head, that there was sort of this conversation. And just like there's conversations with our girlfriends or, other people, but I have felt very fortunate and cursed in some ways, because then it became more permeable to not just other dimensions of beings, the angels, but also with other people. So I've been an empath, I think, in general.
Yeah.
And so then I remember singing at a wedding in church one time, and the bride almost fainted, and I almost fainted. It was the first time I made the connection about how empathic I was physically, emotionally, even mentally. And so then I began to really study and learn about being an empath and how to use these multiple ways of subtle knowing, but not to let them stick.
So would you say that most of your gifts are in the subtle realm? It isn't like you're seeing somebody in the room, or you have a knowing?
It's a knowing. When I do coaching work, I do transformational coaching work, in that safe and sacred space, sometimes words come that are not mine, sometimes images, even of faces of someone that may have impacted someone. Sometimes it's a knowing. It's very kinesthetic. If somebody's working with something in their body, I can physically feel it. And even remote, that once that connection is made in that space-time continuum, that field of consciousness, that morphic field, there's an exchange of energy and information that happens in that way. So yeah.
But being an empath, and I am, maybe not to the degree you are, I don't know, but it can be a difficult existence, not knowing what energy is yours, not knowing what feelings might be yours. Did you find that?
Yeah, as I've studied over the years, I've kind of developed this model where I feel like if I have perceived myself as an individual, I'm at the end of my skin, and if I stub my toe, it hurts. If I have a hard conversation, I have an emotional response to it. But I'm also simultaneously connected in the interconnected, on that plane. And so as I've played with it, and I'm sure for you too, I've learned how to be able to discern a bit about what's mine and what's not mine. And the most important thing for me is, and what's mine to do about it?
Oh, yes.
Right? Yeah. Is it just information? If it's in a coaching session, and I have found over the years, I'm more and more in a circumstance where it's clearer that we are right now here in this contract. We're connected and we're having this conversation, versus other times of walking down the street, or when it's really none of my beeswax, and not taking any of that on has been very helpful. So for me, it's been more the circumstance than it has been not knowing if it's mine or not mine.
Okay.
It's what to do, and if it's mine to be engaged with.
Yeah. And do you have great clarity about that immediately? Because, I mean, as a human being, I'm like, maybe I should help. It's like, but maybe I shouldn't.
It's a constant discernment. And we were talking earlier that it's more and more we're being asked to be mindful in the moment, in this moment. So if I bring all of my history of the things I've learned in the shoulds and shouldn'ts, they don't seem to work as well right now.
Right.
And there's more of a request for all of us to be mindful, multidimensional mindfulness. That's what I call it.
Multidimensional mindfulness. Help me with that.
So I'm mindful in this moment of my physical body, my emotions, my thoughts, my etheric body, my soul body, my higher self, my quantum connection. And if I can have a bit of my attention resting in all these aspects of me,
Wow.
you know, through years of practice,
Yeah.
you know, then it becomes much more clear, to your point.
Yeah.
The discerning is much more in the moment, with information being shared on all those levels. And then, of course, that's kind of the emotional, spiritual intelligence. Now we're talking about social, right, and conversational intelligence. And all those, as I've developed them through years of practice and through years of teaching and coaching, I think really, as a person who puts myself out there as a leader, healer, and teacher, I learn more than just about anyone
Yeah. Yeah.
I have an interaction with. But it's practice, it's playful, it's curious. And then now the moment more and more informs that right action.
Did you sense that this was your work early on?
You know, I was about that same time in my 20s when I started to understand it wasn't everyone's work, and began studying energy medicine and spiritual traditions and Jungian psychology. I had more of a clarity of what was coming, of the massive shift.
You did have an awareness of really the moment we're in now in 2020.
Yes. And it's been building. You know, it's a little bit more exacerbated. It's a little bit more transparent. It's a little bit more obvious. But we've certainly
Yes, it is.
been moving in this direction. And my part, I believe, is carrying a particular energetic frequency that's about where we're going. So I think that we're all, for me, it feels like a tuning fork, and it's a higher frequency. And if I can stay attuned, then other things that are more dense can share in that resonance. And that's sort of the inner experience of my soul contract, my divine blueprint for this time, is to create gatherings, to be in community, whether it's teaching at the University of Minnesota. I'm teaching in 3 different colleges right now. And the stories that come back about people's minds opening, paradigm shift, perspective. It's almost like the magic eye. I think about it. You're right. You see these squiggly lines, and then if we soften our view and expand it, a whole nother view comes into our awareness. And that's what this is about, this expanding consciousness and holding this frequency where all matter. And as I know, you know, I had written this book that got published in 2017 also, called Living from the Center Within.
Yes.
And the subtitle is Co-Creating Who We Are Becoming. And that's the invitation. Those of us interested, now that there's been this big shift and a lot of destruction and deconstruction, there's an opportunity for fertile ground for new era, new growth, new systems. And I'm about hanging out with people who are interested in that process of creating new systems in this new era that is at a higher level of consciousness.
Do you find that people are willing and ready, or is it the people who are already interested are continue to be interested? Are there new groups of people who are opening up to this kind of thinking or feeling?
Yes and yes.
Yes.
Which is often the answer these days. Like it's
or yes and no.
We're moving from this either or to kind of this and, right? And the paradox into, but there are definitely new people. I've had a conversation recently this week with a person who's just begun the path and listened to a webinar I had done, and we followed up with a conversation, and it was delightful. She's just like, I'm just starting to be aware. And the majority of my clients have been on their path, their spiritual path, mind, body, spirit path for some time, and are really wanting to step up, wanting to really be sure they're aligned, their choices, personally, professionally, are aligned with their heart song, and can feel the dissonance, the incoherence, and look for some support through coaching, through some deep dive immersions that I'm co-facilitating and facilitating, and wanting to be in community with people who have an eye on where we're going versus trapped and contracted in the fear of what's what is coming down, what's being exposed, the more transparency of what's not working.
Yeah.
And it's an invitation to move to systems that are much more sustainable and supportive of the whole versus that kind of trifecta of greed or entitlement or oppression is what's crumbling. And it's messy.
Yeah, it is messy. So the people who show up at your door or on your Zoom calls, they're generally in a place of quandary?
They're in a place of quandary. They're in a place of, here's the massive shifts in consciousness I've made, and here's my edge. Here's what I know about the edge of where I hold on, and I know it's fear-based. And here's the edge of what I can see on a timeline opening up, a possible next steps, but it feels too scary to be that big, or, all the beliefs that we bump up against, our limiting belief or self-talk. And so they're looking for someone to process with, some energetic support and community to so we can together be brave, courageous, bold, which is what it's taking.
Yeah.
And to normalize through being in a group of mindfully, intentionally living people. So yeah, they're more committed to their process and looking for a deeper dive. I'm kind of more of a deep dive gal than a dabbler.
Okay, good. And so let's say that they do show up at your door or on a Zoom call. What would the process feel like to them? What would it look like?
The heart of coaching is it's really all about them. So I bring years of education and experience, and one-on-one coaching. They come in and say, here's where I'm at, here's my edges, and we work in any variety of ways. It's conversational, and we might bring in some practice. We might do guided imagery, we might do some breathing, that kind of thing, and then open up to the multi-dimensions of assistance, their guides, their angels, their masters, their ancestors, their descendants even. Sometimes it's been kind of fun. Yeah. And then in groups, it's the same. We have a curriculum with some topics around mind, body, spirit growth, and then also experiential. So journaling, walking, dyads, sharing deeper dyads. Dyads is, we have an opportunity in groups then to do one-on-one, to meet each other, even online now. You can go into your own room with a little assignment about what's been inspiring you lately and what's been terrorizing you, for instance, to take this deeper dive. And then, so sharing in large groups, sharing in small groups, and sharing individually with some homework in between. But the group coaching has been profound.
Really? Why do you think that?
I think because everyone in the group is called into their own leader, healer, and teacher. They're recognized as that. The hierarchy is, I facilitate and do the logistics. The wisdom comes from the group.
I love that.
And so they feel more empowered. They also feel in community, and many times relationships continue long after the offering in more of a membership offering that we offer, or even on their own. We've had a couple of people start a different project together, for instance, because they're coming together in this like-minded community. So it's rich on even more levels.
You may have already answered this, but how do you know if you have accomplished what you set out to do? How do you know if there's been success in your interaction?
Well, one of the main things for me is I need to be unattached to the outcome, because I believe some large percentage of time, 80% of the time, I don't have any feedback, right? I do from students, I do from testimonials, I do from the tears that come and the joy that comes, and watching people step into their power and impact their entire family systems, their entire organizations. I work with organizations, come in, work with the leadership team, do some coaching with some of the leaders, and to watch policies change, people step up into their power, become strength-based organizations. So what I do feel comes back is miraculous and uplifting and empowering. But I do also know that a lot of it is, I don't ever get feedback, and I just trust the process and don't work to unhook, one finger at a time from my own ego.
Yeah.
Needing all that feedback.
Yeah, but that's lovely. That's really, in my mind, the mark of a wonderful coach. You don't create the continual need for you to be engaged. You allow them their own power, to know their own power.
Right.
Right?
The goal is that sovereignty,
Yeah.
you know. And as I said, to this levels of consciousness where people can move comfortably from I am individual, and then they have these experiences and I am interconnected, and they may or may not fit their view of themselves or the systems they're in. And so to normalize that and allow them to relax and open their intuition, open their synchronicity, learn to work with energy. And then the third place in the model is I am infinite. And when we can, in a first person experience, touch into that interconnectedness from the place of unity consciousness, everything changes. We become much more in the moment. We become less worried about the past and the future. We feel like it's not just us having to work hard to make a difference. Now we can open and trust the process of being this amazing, unique expression of the divine, but part of the whole. And now we make our choices from that. And there's almost like, I feel like almost an energetic beacon of a lighthouse that happens.
I saw that, yes.
And all of a sudden we're on. We're available to the universe to be of service in the highest good of what shows up. And for me in my life, I've really seen it as what's attracting to me, right? And the invitations coming my way to speak or to offer a webinar or be on a panel, to teach a class. So it's been delightful to unhook from just being an individual, and that doesn't go anywhere. It's included in the interconnected and the infinite. But who I am and what I am willing to surrender of control and what I'm willing to allow is beyond my wildest imagination from that woman in my 20s who even then had a sense of something coming and wanting to participate. But in my wildest dreams, I couldn't have imagined there would be this much magic.
How would you define consciousness? And then let's talk about the community for higher consciousness. I'm sure that'll fit in.
So I see consciousness as this huge sea of all that is, on all the omniverses, and it's the connecting force field. In our Christian tradition, we call it the Holy Spirit. You know, in the Kabbalistic tradition, the flame of life. Every tradition speaks to this essence, this pure essence. And I believe that as human beings, we can continue to open our awareness to access more of the field of consciousness. I kind of think of it sometimes like a radio. We're the tuning station. And if we continue to broaden versus get off our own one comfortable and open our perspective, we can now receive and participate in multiple levels of consciousness that aren't available with a very tight, narrow, I'm right, you're wrong, either or perspective. And so as we expand into higher levels of consciousness, then we have more and more access to new information, let's say. And I do think that one of the things for me with the community of higher consciousness is that we are all constantly learning. We're all students. And we're all continuing to learn new practices, whether we're a chiropractor or an energy worker or a college professor. The ability to continually be in this learning and teaching mode, and to understand that it's really about this energetic alignment to high frequency, to open to higher consciousness, and then to allow that which comes in. I have met Maureen and Barb and I shared an office in the early 2010-ish, and we in 2012 did this amazing 100+ person community for higher consciousness event, and during the end of the Mayan calendar that day, and since then I've continued to have monthly meetings for people that gather and meditate. Maureen offers meditation groups, and multiple ones of us have spun off and done classes and individual coaching. And so I feel like it's an organic process. We support each other. The container supports each other. We can process together. And we're a beacon of light, not just individually, but coming together. It just makes this huge, I just see us as, any of us as small groups doing the work and being of of service, these columns of light that are connecting and offering attuning opportunity for the whole planet, the planet herself, and everything on and in it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think some people are afraid when you start to speak about such grand growth, consciousness? It isn't necessarily part of the daily lexicon for many people. And how would you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that depending on where somebody is in their own development of who they know themselves to be, this community and my work is more geared towards people who have loosened from the I am right and everybody else is wrong, and I'm going to defend and protect that, kind of like an amygdala hijack, right? We're in our hindbrain, and we're at that level of development. The other piece I will speak to is there's no spiritual bypass. It's not that we can't and shouldn't be looking at racism, for instance, right now, or any other form of oppression, entitlement, right? Greed. Some of these underlying things absolutely need to have spiritual and social activism in them. We need to have the courage to look at systems that are absolutely failing humanity in this planet and have the heartache and the gut-wrenching wisdom and knowledge of those systems and be willing to participate at co-creating systems that just letting those go, not being against them, but creating from this higher level of consciousness. And so I believe everyone on the planet, unless you're completely apathetic, are moved to participate in making this a better place. And so where are you on, to anyone on that level? And I can meet you there. Anyone from this community can meet you there. If you're interested in having the support to continue making a difference on behalf of all who live here. So yes, this esoteric conversation, the language of that may be for people who are familiar with it. But I personally consider myself a translator. And if you're willing to have a conversation with me about living more in your power, I'm happy to meet you where your language is, because it counts. You count no matter where you are on the spectrum of development. And it is our inner nature to want to grow, to be more authentic, more empowered, and more of who we are.
Well, you made me cry, so I think that might be the end. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Is there anything else that you'd like to add beyond making me cry?
Oh, you are such a light. Group mind, group projects, being in fluid groups are really a key to moving us as humanity to this next level of consciousness collectively. So just saying yes, when you feel that yes inside, you're not even sure of the details, but you know what the next right thing is. And just do that and see what magic opens up.